Hi everybody, I'm Suzanne Morrison, and today I'm going to talk about the 7 deadly sins of the retrospective. So stick your hand up if you do regular retrospectives. So quite a few of you, and keep your hand up if you facilitate them regularly. So you'll probably find that you recognise a few of the things that I'm going to talk about today. So just a little bit about myself first. I'm from here in Edinburgh. I work at Skyscanner, just about 15 minutes up the road from here. I work as an Agile coach, and I've been at Skyscanner now for about 4 years. My background in Agile and Scrum has been for about 10 years, and I was a developer before that. My first role in Agile was as a Scrum Master, and when I look back, I just think, what a terrible, terrible Scrum Master I was. It actually makes me cringe sometimes. But the good thing is it's given me lots of fodder for this presentation, so there is a positive out of it. So in case you can't remember what the 7 deadly sins are, I'll just give you a quick reminder. So we've got sloth, pride, greed, lust, gluttony, wrath, and finally envy. So when I came up with the idea for this talk, I thought it's going to be really easy to map on deadly sins onto things that go wrong in retrospectives or dysfunctions of teams. But it actually was a lot more difficult than I thought. I mean, for example, I don't know about you, but I've never witnessed lust in a retrospective yet. So I thought really hard about it for a while, and then I decided to cheat a little bit, and I made up some of my own deadly sins. So you'll be pleased to know I've kept 4 of the originals. So I've got sloth, I've got boredom, pride, wrath, gluttony, forgetfulness, and ignorance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through how do you actually recognise these deadly sins when they're happening in your retrospective, and what can you do to put a stop to them. And more importantly, what can you actually do to prevent these things from happening in the first place. So I'm going to start off with one of my favourite ones, which is sloth. So symptoms of sloth: all talk, no action. So you probably see people having a good old moan, letting off a lot of steam, which can be very useful. But if they don't make any improvements, there's not really any purpose to having that retrospective in the first place. So my remedies for sloth. So first of all, a really simple one is time boxing. If you're familiar with any Agile practice, you'll know about time boxing. But what I'm talking about here is if you're the facilitator, actually planning in advance your time boxes for the retro. I find the brainstorming part doesn't take much time, so it doesn't take long for people to think about what's going wrong, it doesn't take long for people to think about what's going well. But what does take the long time is actually coming up with good improvements that the team can make. So just make sure you've got enough time in there. I've certainly been guilty, even recently, of sitting there going, oh shit, I've only got 5 minutes left and the team haven't come up with any ideas for improvement. So it's really good just to think about this in advance. The other one is use the task board. I've seen teams come up with ideas for improvements and they just kind of hide them away on a spreadsheet somewhere and everybody forgets about them. So actually use your task board, whether it's a physical task board or if it's an electronic one. Just put the improvements in there, and everyone will see them every day in the stand-up, and they'll be much more likely to actually do something about them. And the final one is just take a little bit of time at the start of your retro and say, what were the improvements that we made the last time? Did they actually work? If they didn't work, why not? And if you get into the habit of that, then that's going to make it much more likely that people will actually make the improvements. The next one's boredom. You might have come across this before, just a general lack of energy, or not another retrospective, lack of enthusiasm, kind of falling asleep in the room. You might find that people are discussing the same thing again and again, talking about what they talked about 3 retros ago. Or it might just be that they use the same format over and over again. So remedies for this is something that you probably don't have any excuse for going wrong. So just mix it up. There's so many different formats you can use. You're probably familiar with some of these ones. You know, stop, start, continue, repeat, avoid, what slows us down, what speeds us up, the 4 Ls, which is something like loved, lacked, learned and longed for. One that I really like is using themes. So when you have a retro, actually focus it on a specific theme. So say, let's talk about today how we can improve our daily stand-up, or let's talk about how our remote teams can work better together, or how we can do better estimation. And that just makes it a lot more targeted and focused. Another one that I like to do, and it's a kind of a good test to see if the people in the team remember what the Agile values are, is just put the Agile values up on the wall and ask people what happened in the last iteration that helped you to kind of fulfill one of these Agile values. And you can use that to open a retro, or you can use it as a full retro and say what didn't we do, what went against the Agile values. And another one which has become one of my favourites is something called De Bono's 6 Thinking Hats, and this is a guy called Edward De Bono, who's known as a lateral thinker. And he's got a really good technique that you can use for problem solving as an individual or as a team. And what you do is you put a metaphorical hat on. So for example, if you have a white hat on, you can only speak based on facts and data. If you have a red hat on, you can only speak using your gut instincts. If you have a black hat on, you can only be critical. So what you can do is you can time box your retro, have a few minutes for each hat, and then at the end use the green hat to come up with creative ideas to kind of solve the problems that you've come up with. If you're lacking for ideas, I really highly recommend this book, Agile Retrospectives, by Esther Derby and Diana Larson. It sits on my desk at work and I just kind of have a peek into it whenever I'm needing some inspiration. And also the first URL there is called Retromat, and this is a brilliant site for just getting ideas of how to open a retro, how to kind of gather data, how to close a retro. So there's plenty of ideas out there, so there's no reason for doing mad, sad, glad every single time and just boring everyone to sleep. The next one is pride. So you might sometimes find that some people in your team have a sense of self-importance. The things that I say are the most important things, everyone should listen to me. Or it might be that people have a fear of kind of admitting what went wrong. They're a bit ashamed of admitting what went wrong. Or it could just be that they don't acknowledge the rest of the team when they do good work, or other teams when they help them. So a few remedies for this one. So first of all, you could do something called a 360-degree appreciation at the beginning of a retro, where you just take 5 minutes for people to actually tell each other what they appreciate about each other. And we have these little notes at Skyscanner that we sometimes use to write notes to people. The other one is just think about who you're going to invite to the retro. I mean, I found if you have line managers in there, or perhaps the CEO, people are probably going to hold back just a little bit. They're not going to kind of get things out there. And then the other one is skillful facilitation. So as a facilitator, you're going to notice if somebody's really dominating the conversation, so trying to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak and that you're able to point out in a neutral way, if somebody's kind of got that self-importance going on. The other one's wrath. So thankfully this is one that I don't see very often. I don't normally see it at Skyscanner, so it's all good. But this can be the symptom of this can be negativity. So of course in a retro you're going to talk about some negative things, you're going to talk about positive things, but if it gets all too negative, that can be quite damaging. The other one is blaming others, so not taking the responsibility when something goes wrong, always looking for somebody to blame. And the final one is conflict. I always think that it's really good to have conflict in a team. It can be really healthy. You can get lots of diverse opinions and lots of debates going on, but if it gets destructive and gets very personal, that can be really damaging and it doesn't end up in a good retrospective. So some remedies for this one. So some of you might have come across something called the Retrospective Prime Directive. If you haven't, you can Google it and you can print it out. So I sometimes like to read this at the beginning of a retro just to kind of reassure people that we believe that people have the best intentions when they do things. When we're critiquing stuff, we're thinking about how we can improve things going forward. We're not looking to blame other people. The other one is a safety check. So this is a good one if you're not really sure whether or not the team are happy to share things with each other. So what you do is you ask people to rate from 1 to 5 how safe they feel to share things with others in the retrospective. So 1 would be, I really don't feel comfortable and I want to get out of this room as soon as possible. And 5 would be, I'm really happy to share anything or talk about anything. And you might find if a lot of people in the team are rating a 1 or a 2, you might not even want to go ahead with the retro. You might want to do a bit of kind of discussion with these people and find out what's behind it. Or it might be that you can do a retro, but you maybe can't get much out of it. You're only really scratching the surface there. And the other one, again, I'm mentioning facilitation again. But 2 things here. 1 is planning the retro so that there's enough positive and negative stuff and there's a good balance. It's not just all about the negative. And also as a facilitator, being able to point out to somebody when they're being really negative or really personal towards somebody, you can do it in a neutral way so that it's not kind of really pointed and accusational. The next one is gluttony. So this was my favourite one when I was a new Scrum Master. I think the first retro I did was something like that. It was a bit of a disaster and I kind of felt like I had to try and help the team solve every problem. So this is when you feel like you're trying to talk about everything, you're trying to fix everything. Or it could just be that you're assigning too many actions. You come out of the retro and you've got 20 actions for your next sprint. Or it might just be that you assign all the actions but you never complete any. So my remedies for this one, really simple one. You've probably come across the sticky dots, so really obvious. Just prioritise, give the team 3 dots each, ask them to put them on the things that are most important to them, and then prioritise them for discussion and improvements. The other one is focus. So if you just pick 1 thing or 2 things that you're going to improve, there's a lot more chance of you kind of having an impact compared to if you pick 10 things and then get them all half finished. And the other one is just accepting. So I kind of felt really bad when I couldn't solve all the problems as a new Scrum Master. But after time, you just have to accept that you can't solve everything at once. If it's really important, it's going to come up again in another retrospective. It's not going to be forgotten anyway. The next one's forgetfulness. So this could be just forgetting what happened in the last project or the last release, or even worse, what happened in the last sprint. I sometimes go to a daily stand-up and people can't remember what happened yesterday, so it can be a bit of a problem. So remedies for this one. First of all, if you're doing Scrum, don't skip the sprint review. A lot of people, it seems to be a favourite meeting for some people to skip, but by demoing the software, by getting feedback about what work has been completed and what hasn't, that's going to be a good refresher and help you with your retro. You can also do something called an emotional seismograph, which is very touchy-feely. And I tried this with there's a team at work that I like to experiment on. So I got them to do this one morning. It was a Monday morning. And basically you've got happiness at the top, sadness at the bottom. You plot a few things that have happened in your last iteration, and then you get each team member to kind of draw where their emotions were over the course of the sprint. And it can just be really interesting to see the differences in how the team are feeling. And it can also be a really good way for kind of people to remember what happened in the sprint, and also just a kind of good icebreaker to start things off as well. The other one is the mailbox retro. This is really where you set up a post box for forgetful people, and they just put in stuff like, you know, things that are going wrong in the sprint, ideas that they have for improvement. And the idea is at your retro, you just open up the mailbox, be it an electronic one or a physical one, and you start reading out the stuff from the mailbox and talking about potential improvements from that. And then the final one, if you're doing a retro for a big release, you might want to do what we call like a kind of release timeline or a project timeline. So this is one that I used for a mobile app project. It was a new mobile app and it lasted about 7 months of development. So what we did is we just kind of plotted key things that had happened over the course of 7 months, like new features that had been developed or people that had joined the team. So hopefully all of these things together will help with the bad memories in the team. And then finally, ignorance. I think this is probably the worst one of all. And when I say ignorance, I mean the ignorance of the benefits of actually doing a retrospective in the first place. So this could be dropping the retrospective when things seem too busy, when there's a deadline looming, which is probably one of the times when it actually does matter. And also not having retrospectives at all. So it might be that you just don't see the value of them, the team doesn't see the value of them, so you decide not to bother. So my remedies for this one. So first of all, if you're working as a kind of Scrum Master or an Agile coach, just being able to continually educate teams on the why behind what they're doing, on the Agile values, the importance of continually improving is a good way to help with this. The other one is a bit of one-to-one coaching. You know, if people don't want to do retrospectives, there's probably a reason behind that. And what I found in the past is sometimes it can be somebody has been in a team before, they've done retros and it's just not worked, or they've never made any improvements, so there's a reluctance. So sometimes a bit of coaching to understand why can help people to change their minds or be willing to try something. And the final one, really simple, just put it in the diary. People expect it to happen every 2 weeks. So I've talked about lots of negative things, but hopefully there have been some ideas for kind of positive things and improvements as well. So I just wanted to finish off by talking about what I think are the 7 signs of a great retrospective. So the first one is a feeling of safety. If you don't have that feeling of safety in the team, you're not going to be able to get very deep and solve the really important things that matter to the team that are going to help them. Constructive and honest discussions. It's good to have debate, it's good to disagree, but it has to be done in a constructive way, not in a personal negative way. The whole team speaks. So I've been in meetings before where, you know, 1 or 2 people dominate the conversation. So just being a facilitator that makes sure that people all have the chance to speak, or perhaps designing a structure for the retrospective that encourages everyone to talk. Having enough time. I still have this from time to time. I go, you know, I've not got much time left, we're not going to, you know, get any actions. I think occasionally it's good to just have that discussion where people get to air their views and understand each other. I had a retrospective recently where we didn't really come up with an action, but the team felt really good because they had understood each other and they've got things out into the open. So sometimes, you know, it's good to do that, but just making sure you've got enough time to come to actions when you do have the retrospectives. Checking the previous actions, so having this regular kind of checking what you did last time, what you improved, did it work or not, just making sure you're getting benefit out of doing the retros. Also recognising and celebrating the positive things, so it's not all doom and gloom, it's not all about things that you're doing badly, there's also the good things that you've delivered or the improvements that you've done that have worked well. And finally, agreeing some changes. So the whole point of doing the retrospective is to actually make change, make positive change and improve the way that you work together. And just finally touching on the Agile values, so doing regular retrospectives helps you to become more agile. You've got an Agile value there about people and interactions. The retrospectives all about looking at how these people are interacting together and improving that going forward. And then the Agile principle, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behaviour accordingly, and that kind of perfectly describes what a retrospective should do. And that is me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now or in the pub later on. You can tell me whether you've experienced lust in a retrospective or not. Thank you.